everyone, it's Yanni podcast about biotech and biohacking everything by Yanelab team. And today I have a very special guest, Lera Niemackl, a resident mycologist at the Odin, artist, sculptor, and my bestie. Was that right? Did I miss anything?
Yeah, I think you got it.
Okay. And we're going to talk about mushrooms, fungi, everything. I'm going to talk because I feel like mushrooms are very, it's a huge topic, but there's a huge bias about how, like, when you start talking about mushrooms and people only think about either, like, champignons you buy and fry in your pan or psychedelics. So, I know, most of the people I met that are talking about mushrooms, usually they were talking about psychedelics and looked a little crazy, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I think there's a stigma that needs to be, broken to shed light on mushrooms.
I agree. There's like a lot of what they call mycophobia in the West. But it's also an interesting thing because mushrooms are people's understanding of fungus, but like the magic isn't even in the mushroom phase. So much of it's in the mycelial phase. So
Why
that
is it
right
so?
there. Oh, because, that's the part of the organism that continues to live. Mushrooms are super ephemeral and they, I'm projecting here, but the purpose of a mushroom is like to fruit and spread their spores. But like the species that are really responsible for the health of the forest floor, the mining, the metabolites, the digestion, that's really important and has a lot of like precocious applications in the biotech world. That's all happening in mycelium. And I have more fun working with that personally. I'm more interested in that. But, it's kind of considered a microorganism, which is also something interesting about fungi. Like they really do intersect the microbiology and macrobiology. Sure, they start off as a spore and you need a microscope to see that. But eventually, you grow enough of it, it becomes a colony that you can recognize on this scale, on this plane. And then a mushroom. So it really does like straddle this line of microbiology, not microbiology, macrobiology, sure, whatever. And even like genetically and biologically speaking, people are trying to understand fungi, like coming from the plant perspective, and the animal perspective, and the bacterial perspective, and none of it's quite right. It's like, it's its own kingdom, it's its own thing. And I have met adults in my lifetime, many that don't know that simple fact, that they are their own kingdom. So.
Yeah, and also I heard that we are more related to mushrooms than any other kingdom.
Yeah, that's true. There's a fun fact. When I was running the cordyceps militaris farm, we were going through an organic certification, and the inspector that we had to work with was looking at everything we were doing, like checking the substrate we were giving the fungus, and he was telling us that in certain parts of the Northeast, mushrooms don't have their own like category for organic certification. They're considered a livestock commodity, not a plant one, which makes sense because plants are allotrophs. They make their own food. But in the livestock world, like you have to give these animals foods to eat. And that matters for the meat, like what the diet of the animal influences the quality of the meat. And it's the same thing with fungus. Like they have to eat their food. They're heterotrophs. They digest things. They metabolize things. So that was just interesting. And that was a very like blatant way of seeing just how much more similar they are to the animal kingdom than the plant. Not to mention that they breathe oxygen, let out CO2. Their cell walls are made of biopolymers you don't find in the plant kingdom, like chitin. They're really like little pets, kind of.
At first, when I started talking to you and just getting to know you, I was surprised to know that you were like an amateur. You're an amateur mycologist. Like you don't have a degree, you didn't go to school or like anything. And even though I'm a biohacker, I'm pro, or amateur science, but there was a different approach from you for some reason. And I just can you just talk about how you started, mycology? How did you, how does one end up teaching and learning about mushrooms?
Yeah, working full time for fungus. Well, I think through art, because I always wanted to be like a sculptor, and I got a lot of morphological inspiration from the natural world. Like I was really into like ginger roots, sweet potatoes, like tendril perversion, all these weird phenomena that were happening in like organic plant matter. So I'd go to like the woods, walk around, and just look for inspiration of anything, like whether it be a texture, pattern, a shape, whatever. And that's when I started like kind of noticing mushrooms and fungi. And then I really liked that. I was like, wow, a mushroom can be more than just the cap and stem. Like there's so many interesting shapes and colors and textures to a mushroom. And that sort of just snowballed into this obsession because, of course, I look up like, what's the deal with mushroom? What is that? Why can't I find them year round? Like I'm going out in the summer, I don't see any mushrooms, but I want to. Why not? And then you just discover more and more about their biology. And I realized that they're super understudied. And of course, like the myco-influencers at the time were really romanticizing like how mushrooms can save the world, blah, blah, blah. So sure, I was definitely influenced by the whole Paul Stamets craze, back in like 2015. And this was like in high school-ish. Right before college. But I even tried to pursue mycology in school, but I quickly found out that is super rare to offer a mycology degree. If you study mycology, it's like a chapter in a book in the botany department, or you're studying microbiology and you're generally focusing on like plant pathogens or like yeast biotech or something. But as far as like focusing on biology, like how botany is this whole world of understanding the physiology of a plant and just getting to know that biology, that just doesn't exist for fungus. But it's becoming more ubiquitous. Like, of course, there's a lot of biotech startups in the 21st century that are like encouraging that, offering education outside of academia for people to understand it. And that's all of how I've learned. I don't think I ever really learned anything about fungus from school. So like books, discovering Sci-Hub and learning how to download these things, LibGen, I think, for books. And then like also learning how to read scientific papers. Because people aren't writing about fungal cell biology 101. They're just writing about fungal cell biology for, experts. And
why do you think, because mushrooms and fungi, it's a whole different kingdom. And why do you think they're so under-researched and underrated in general?
I think a lot of it has to do with how ephemeral they are and like under-pronounced they are in the real world. Like a tree isn't going to go anywhere. It doesn't matter what season it is. You're going to see that year round. But like a mushroom is extremely ephemeral. Some of them pop up and rot within a couple days. And the rest of that organism is hidden underground. So unless you're digging through the soil and then you see mycelium and ask yourself what this is, your chances of encountering a fungus are really, at least encountering a fungus tangibly, substantially, is rare. And it wasn't until like the 1960s that they got their taxonomic independence from plants. They were like understood to be lower plants.
Wow.
Yeah, so they're just like they're totally the underdogs in the way that they do all of their ecosystem contributions in the dark, literally.
Why do you think there's also... I feel bad for mushrooms, because not only they're... sirens are so loud here.
Yeah, I heard
Like-
that even.
Like all the cars, and like it wasn't even on the street. I'm sorry for like, because it's like it scares me still. Like when we went to Berlin, because sirens are so loud, I just get like all jumpy. Because like after air raid and like missile alerts, you kind of become conscious of what sounds are out there. But yeah, speaking of mushrooms.
Can't imagine.
Yeah.
I'm just glad that I'm looking at you, living and breathing behind a screen in a safe 2,000 population town in Germany.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope to. I mean, I love it here, but I hope to leave soon. Also, I like walked around the forest here. There are no mushrooms yet, maybe yet, but just the forest doesn't seem so dense like in Vancouver or something. And I mean, honestly, it's obviously it's a different kind of forest. But I was like, oh, there's not even mushrooms here. How boring! Like I only found like 2 kinds of lichen, and I was just so disappointed.
Oh yeah, that's me in Texas. It's way too dry here. The sun like sterilizes everything.
The sun is too intense.
I know. Yeah. It's rare to find mushrooms in Texas, but
I feel like I already gained like skin cancer from being in Austin for 3 months.
I feel you. We just gotta get you some good sunscreen.
Yeah, but you can, I also underrated mushrooms before I met you, and we started talking about it. But then you infected me with these spores of mycophilia, and then I went to Canada. And there's the Canadian forests are like ethereal. This is something amazing, and when you see that it's not only just like the body of a mushroom, and just it's not like a, I don't know, champignon you would usually cook with your chicken at home in Ukraine. You see more of it, and it becomes so weird because like I went on like one walk and I saw like 30, 40, 50 kinds of different mushrooms. Some were like eating each other, some were infecting insects or spiders and killing them, and it's super unique. But like, why do you think there's still a stigma, and does this stigma makes it harder for people to see mushrooms as something awesome? Because like mushrooms are surrounded by stigma. Like I think when you say like, oh, I'm just like, what I do is like it's connected to mushrooms, and people would be like, she's definitely talking about psilocybin.
I think like drugs or manure. So
yeah,
the stigma is very real. Why? Because those are the only mushrooms we seem to talk about as a society. It's like we have the champignon button mushrooms, and everyone knows they grow off manure, so that's kind of gross to people. So does psilocybin, but like when Gordon Wasson went to Mexico, found out that these species existed, started talking about it, people were curious. They were like, what? A mushroom-based, like, psychedelic drug? I mean, it was just really different from anything that people in the Northwest had seen before. And it wasn't illegal yet. So there was, like, the whole wave of psilocybin, and then people sharing cultures and learning how to cultivate it. So the most pronounced that fungi have been to a consumer have been, like, these bud mushrooms, which many people don't like just as a food, period. And these psychedelic so-called like drug Schedule 1 mushrooms. So I get it. Like no one's growing mushrooms because they're pretty to look at or because they're delicious. I mean, they are now, but the up and coming was not great.
What mushrooms people should look into and just should pay attention to? Because I don't even know how many just species, and just there is a mushrooms kingdom is insanely huge, and it's still being discovered all the time because it's really, there's like fake mushrooms and it's hard to tell which one is which, but there's so many undiscovered mushrooms. And like, what are your top 5 mushrooms? What do you think people should learn about?
I'm a big fan of Ganoderma because its mycelium is super robust. This is the species that most of like the mycomaterial biotech companies are making it out of. And it just creates like a composite that is really light. It floats, it's flame resistant, it's really fast to grow. And I've just never seen any of all the fungus I've grown, which is many, like probably over 20 like mushroom fruiting fungi that I've attempted to grow. Ganoderma creates like this crazy substrate. It is so difficult to break apart. I have to use knives to cut through it. So materialistically, just as the mycelium of itself, you're not even treating this stuff. It's great. It's good stuff. I think that there's a lot of potential within that whole genus. And then the mushrooms itself, like I just find them to be really beautiful. What's cool about Ganoderma mushrooms is that they're so responsive to their environment. So most mushrooms you grow have a predetermined morphology. Like if you're going to fruit button mushrooms, there's like one way that that's going to look. They're going to make a cap with the stem, and that's how button mushrooms look. But Ganoderma, wow, you can like coax it to go up and down and be like an antler, really thin and tall, or fan out like a conch. They will mold to things. Like if you subject them to confined geometry, they'll take up that geometry. So this is all like very artistic. This, that's kind of the thing that I'm seeing within that genus, that they are really responsive to stimuli, and you can work with those tropes. And that's exciting to me. But then there's a very practical element too. Like Ganoderma is a wonderful material for like myco leathers. So if you're seeing like the whole mushroom leather craze thing, which I'm sure a lot of people who listen to your podcast also pay attention to the biotech world, 90% of the time that's going to be from this genus. I also am really interested in Armillaria. It's a genus of fungi that they have this really unique quality where their mycelium ropes together and like wraps to make what's called a rhizomorph, which is basically just like these knotted threads of mycelium. And then on the outside of that threading is this melanin sheath. So they're protected from the UV, and like that allows them to come up out of the ground and grow under the sunlight, which you just do not see in mycelium. Like mycelium doesn't grow out in the open, right? We were just talking about how, cryptic they are because they're under the soil. But Armillaria doesn't do that. And that genus also houses the so-called biggest organism on Earth by acreage. It's an organ. And it's just like, there's something so impressive about its biology and how simplistic it is. It's just like, okay, we're going to combine all of our cells, make them really, really tightly woven together, put a little melanin wrapping around it, and now they have, like from the biological perspective, become one of the most successful species. And you can eat those mushrooms too. They're called honey mushrooms, and they're delicious. It also is bioluminescent. You can grow them on agar, I have, and they make the most interesting agar plates. They look like little aliens. I actually have one if you want to see it.
Oh yeah, heck yeah. Of course I want to see.
So this one's pretty old, but like...
It looks so creepy.
I know.
It looks like a weird insect. Like a bee, maybe?
David hated this one when I was showing it to him for the first time.
Why did he hate it?
He's just funny. Like, not so much anymore, but when I was first working here and like started growing fungus, he was just like, that looks really creepy. I don't want to touch it. But now he's all interested, and we discuss ways that we can grow mushrooms better together. It's really cute.
Like, I feel like mushrooms are so much more interesting because I always work with like bacteria, it's just like, that's like the most boring stuff ever, because like when you do genetic engineering, it's pretty boring. There's not much diversity when you grow bacteria in petri dishes. But like when I worked at the Odin with you, my favorite part was like walking by your desk, because there was so many just like fun stuff to look at, like 1,000 petri dishes with like the craziest mushrooms ever growing out there. And I feel like everyone is kind of jealous at the Odin.
Oh,
Because
wow.
it just seems so much more interesting, right?
Yeah, I think part of that has to do with its nascency. And like, I was talking about this with the team the other day. Like, no one is teaching anyone how to grow Panella stypticus, which is the bioluminescent species that we have here. I had to like look through all these shrubbery forums and stuff to see what people had done and had success with. But then like, ultimately what was best was just trial and error with a bunch of stuff. And it's so simple. Like, yeah, it has its quirks, but it's easy to grow this mushroom. And it would be so great for more people to know about it because, like, yeah, maybe it's just a novel thing. It's a novelty product. There's this glowing fungus that might fruit mushrooms for you, but that right there, offering that product to the public, like, does a couple things. Like, one, it sparks appreciation for the kingdom. Like, two, it's beautiful, and they might ask more questions. They might just, like, their lives might have this one element of goodness added to them. And, like, I don't know. It's been such a delightful thing to work with Panella stypticus, especially when I had a ton of jars, and I'd go into the bathroom and, like, shut the door, you know, put the paper under the door so none of the light came in, let my eyes adjust, took, like, 30 seconds to a minute, and then it was just, like, this glorious glow. And it was so fun. And I, like, have had multiple moments in that bathroom thinking to myself, wow, let's see, 4 years ago, I started getting really serious into cultivation. And if I knew that, like, I would be to the point I am now, 4 years ago, where I'm, like, getting paid to learn how to grow this species of fungus that I knew existed, but didn't think I'd have any, like, interaction with. So what a win.
Your dream job?
It's just so special. Yeah, for sure.
Now you're teaching a mycology class at the Odin. Like, I think you just finished teaching a class before we started talking. How do you like that? How do you like teaching people?
I really love it. And this class was special because there were two things that, like, we offered in that kit that I thought would be such a struggle. Like, one was making agar in a microwave, and I know that sounds ridiculous because every biologist has been doing this. But it really took a while for me to have successful pores. It's just a completely different media, and you can't use antifungals because you're trying to grow a fungus on it, but you can use antibiotics. So you got the bacteria taken care of. But contamination, when working with fungi, that's just like the bane of every fungus farmer's existence. You're going to deal with it. And I was so surprised that we could successfully make antibiotic malt extract agar in a microwave, tell people how to do it, and all they need is a microwave. No flow hoods, no, like, hyper sterile spaces. It was really, really cool. And the other one were these bricks. So I think one of the barriers of entry for people who want to grow fungus and mushrooms is this need to be pasteurized or sterilized. And that requires, like, equipment to some degree. Like a pressure cooker, you can use, like, an Instapot, things like that, but ultimately, like, what you need is equipment. Or to really know what you're doing with pasteurization, and, you know, that skill can take many years to develop. But there's these firewood bricks you can buy. They're, like, compacted small bricks. They're probably like a kilo per brick. And the way that they're treated in the industry is just, like, heated and compressed. And that method pasteurizes them. Then you add boiling water, and you have a substrate that has never failed me. I've tried, like, 5 different species of fungi, even the ones that contaminate the easiest. I've never had a problem with it. And, like, all the person needs to do is add boiling water. That's crazy to me. I've never seen something so easy and versatile. Like, it doesn't just work for this one fungus. It's worked for Panella stypticus, it's worked for Ganoderma, it's worked for oyster, it's worked for lion's mane, like, all the ones that I've tried. So that's cool. Like, and I couldn't have done that without the Odin. Just, like, having these discussions, pushing the limits, be encouraged to be crazy, trying stuff.
Check out the mushroom kit in the description. No, just pay me.
I'll get some commission as well.
Just
any sale we make after April 17th.
Yeah, all of it comes to me.
Yeah.
Supporting Ukrainian refugees. Do you think that with all the progress made and so many protocols you have to come up with yourself, right? Because there's no protocol, or there's no resources. And especially with mushrooms, the media can be so simple, as simple as the fire bricks. Do you think that anyone who wants to start, doing mycology, doing mushroom work at home, because you had a home lab where you worked with mushrooms.
Yeah.
Do you think anyone is there a threshold for someone to get started? Is it hard for someone?
There definitely is, more so than other practices, I think, in biology and in farming, if you want to consider mushroom growing farming. It depends on why you're working with it. But that's really what we were trying to identify and produce. And I think with the microwave protocols and the things like the bricks, at that point it's just a matter of sourcing materials that aren't necessarily common. But this is just mushroom farming, mushroom growing in the West, period. There are very few things that I use in the lab that are meant for mushroom growing. A lot of it is stuff that's been repurposed or that just happens to work for it. One of the things I can think of is for grain spawn or liquid culture, you need a filter to have fresh air exchange that you can autoclave. So people use syringe filters for that. That's not what a syringe filter is for, but it works great, so we use it. And that's the case for so many of the materials that are used. I think filter bags are the one thing that, from the beginning, was designed for this purpose. Everything else, it's just someone out there experimented with it, had it work, and then, tells everyone else about it. But it was a pre-existing material or product meant for something else.
Do you think that studying mushrooms can be rewarding, in a sense of if people put effort into, researching more, do you think mushrooms can offer something to humanity? Not in a psychedelic way.
I feel I have to say yes to this question. But yes, of course I believe that. I think what it does for me, what it did for me, and what I see it do for a lot of other people is just show them that, holy shit, there's this thing I can do I didn't know I could do. It's really exciting to see mushrooms fruit. I don't know why it is. It's when I sprout seeds, that's exciting. It's cool to see life emerge out of something you're really hands off on. But with mushrooms, you have to be a little more involved. So part of its success is due to your contribution. With plants, they're pretty independent. You give them the basics. With fungus, you have to consider it. You have to watch it. You have to give it things that it needs more than one time. You can't just plant a spore in a pot and put it in a windowsill and let it go. You have to interact with it a lot more. So for that reason, yeah, it is rewarding. And you get fruits of your labor. It's really cool to see something microscopic go from a tiny tissue thing on a petri plate to this substantial thing that you can smell and hold and maybe eat or whatever it is that you grew. Yeah, and it's a skill I think people would benefit from, especially if there's an apocalypse. What are we going to do once there's too much smog in the air and we can't grow plants anymore? You can grow mushrooms in the dark. You can grow it off cardboard.
Do you think, first of all, there's a lot of talk about, what are the practical uses of mushrooms, And like people usually say like, yeah, it's like food, yeah, it's like psychedelic, which can be used, you know, to treat different like mental conditions, which is also great that it's, you know, happening right now because there are trials and people don't look as, you know, as they used to at psychedelic mushrooms. But, you know, there's also, you're doing sculpture, you work a lot with mycelium, and a lot of people say that mycelium could be like the material of the future. Why do you think, what makes mycelium special in case we're talking about materials?
Well, I think it's a packaging material of the future because we reached for a lot of petroleum-derived things that aren't good for the planet. And, like, no one gives a shit about that. No one cares about the quality of their, like, styrofoam that's protecting the corner of their TV when they get it delivered in the mail. That stuff ends up in the trash. So where like materials like mycelium comes in, with the composite specifically is what I'm thinking of, is like the material is designed to be like thrown away. But in its journey, it has that very protective element. You know, and some great things about it is like, a fungus eats some of the most undesirable foods in the microbial world. Like, bacteria, other microbes have a hard time digesting cellulose and lignin. And, like, things that are often byproducts of agricultural things, like hemp hulls or, like, pecan shells, things like this. So people compost it or just give it to landfill. But, like, fungus and mushrooms, this is their catnip. This is like what their role in evolution is, to digest these really complicated things. So we have an abundance of this stuff. It's literally like dirt cheap, the stuff that this mycelium will grow off of. So it's extremely sustainable in that way. It grows really fast. Ecovative's gotten to the point where I think like in 4 days of inoculation, you have your material. Obviously, we have a hard time scaling that right now because people don't have like factories pumping out the facilities or the materials needed for this like mycocomposite, but it's extremely scalable. We just need to invest in it, and it's a lot less taxing on everyone and everything than styrofoam if you just consider like not the scale, but the journey of the material itself. We don't have to frack for oil to turn it into styrofoam. It doesn't require toxic chemicals. It just requires like a little bit of dirt and time. We've got that.
Do you think what reasons are there to, you know, for people to get into studying mushrooms?
Well, it's exciting to be part of it now because since it's so nascent, especially like in the DIY world, it's very easy to discover something unique. You know, like I do a lot of first time things here. And that's not saying much because like if I autoclave my sandwich and then like put some liquid culture on it, maybe that's the first time someone's tried to go Ganoderma on a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or whatever. But it's true. Like I am doing things like that. Like when David had HEK cells that he didn't want anymore, just for fun, I would like squirt some fungus in there and it grew on it. It's just like, okay, whatever. I'm just fucking around. Maybe it doesn't mean anything. But the point is that when you mess with fungus, even if you make mistakes, you really are failing forward with trying to getting to understand its capabilities. And there's all sorts of like cute stories out there. Like there's this couple, a chef couple, who was fermenting tempeh with different fungus just to see, you know, what it produced, because they're chefs and they want to be cutting edge. And they would eat this tempeh that they grew with a cordyceps species, and they noticed that their tongues felt odd or that food tasted differently after. And like after some screening and working with scientists, they found that that fungus had a molecule that bound to the bitter receptors on your tongue. And now there's a product for it. It's called Clear Taste. And like any company making commercialized sweets can buy this product, put it in their food, and use less sugar to neutralize the bitter flavor of like the chocolate that you might be adding to your food or whatever. And that was just like two people in their kitchen messing around, noticing something, asking a question, and putting in the effort to understanding what was happening. And now it's a commodified product that like could be good for the health of so many other people in the population. You know, if we didn't put so much sugar in processed food, it wouldn't be so bad for us. And this is a product that can help that. So that's just one example.
There's so many more. Do you feel like, all these stories you tell, do you feel like, like a first scientist in 17th century discovering some things just because they're curious to see what's happening? And it's kind of like that. Like, because you literally, if you start mycology, you can be the first person to try something, right? Try new media, because even with bacteria, there's still so much, unlearned about media and culturing and everything, even though bacteria are so much more, research, so much more well-known for scientists than mushrooms are. And there is a joy of feeling like you can be the first person to discover something.
Yeah, it's fun. And you're almost guaranteed to be like the cool weird kid in your friend group.
Do you think it's hip to I almost said to do mushrooms. No, I meant to grow and research mushrooms.
It's pretty hip, I think.
You think so?
I'm biased, but like, yeah.
Cool kids are gonna do that?
It's pretty trendy. Way trendier than it was many years ago.
Do you think that now modern mycology basically runs on the backs of amateur mycologists?
That's a good question. Yeah, I do think a lot of that. I'm starting to see people who've pursued more professionally, like biology, look into mycology, and that's been great to see. There's a few YouTube channels like Everyman Bio and Fresh from the Farm Fungi, who, the hosts of these YouTube channels have a lot of experience in the bio world, and they bring a level of proficiency and understanding to mycology that most amateur mycologists reasonably don't have, because like you kind of have to be a scientist to grow mushrooms more so than a farmer, but ultimately, like, besides knowing how to culture from an agar plate and knowing what the word like sterile means and how to achieve that, that's about as scientific as you need to get away with successfully farming fungus. So yeah, I do think a lot of it's like pioneered by amateur mycologists, and I love seeing that. It's really inspiring for people. Yeah. It's good stuff.
What's your favorite mushroom? Is it Pinus stypticus?
I don't know. This question...
That's a glow-in-the-dark mushroom. Because it's pretty badass. Like, it literally...
Yeah.
Like, you can buy a mushroom that, like, stands there in your room and just glows in the dark.
Yeah.
And it's not even engineered. It's just, like, that's just how this mushroom is.
I think my favorite, though, is the one I was begging you to look for in British Columbia. The gelatinosum.
Yeah.
Cat's tongue, yeah.
Were you able to culture it?
No, unfortunately. When it finally got here, like, it had turned into, like, a soup.
Ew.
Oh. Yeah, it's sad.
Gross.
We'll go back.
Yeah. It's gonna be in Canada pretty soon, so you have to come to Canada, and we're gonna go mushroom hunting.
Yeah.
It's only like 6-hour trip from Austin.
Only 6-hour trip. By plane. Much. Yeah.
Yeah, just
it's
you have
so
layovers.
Worth it. Also, Austin's way too hot to be here in the summer. Like, I'm looking for places to go that isn't here.
I'll be happy. We have to film like mushroom hunt.
Yeah, let's do it.
You could be like way better pole estimates.
I don't know about that. Maybe. It depends on why you're into mushrooms, I guess. But, I'm kind of a contrarian. I like to root for the underdog. Mushrooms were weird. Like, it's fun to be part of something that most people think is odd or is misunderstood because, I don't know. I also I'm kind of a loner with my work a lot of the time. And,
because no one gets it, no one understands what's going on.
More so every day. Or maybe that's just like me being involved in the community and I'm meeting people who do know what they're doing, but...
Do you think you're gonna, research mushrooms for the rest of your life? Is that a thing someone can do for their whole life?
Yeah, 100%. I think it'll always be part of my craft, yes. I do. Yeah.
Where can people find you? Like, if they want to learn more about you and, like, mushrooms and anything, what would you recommend them?
My Instagram is where I document some things. So that's Lera Niemackl. And then I do have a website that's slowly being built out, mycological.com. And obviously the Odin. Like, if I work on anything fungal and it turns into something useful or able to be made into a kit, it'll be on the Odin website. I also used to host a podcast all about fungi, so if you're really into this and you want to spend like an entire hour talking about penicillin or something super specific, you can find over 100 episodes that I've contributed to where we're talking about that specific fungal phenomenon.
Thank you so much for doing this podcast with me. Even though I tried to record it for 6 months, we've been trying to.
Oh, sure, yeah. We'll have to have a round 2 when you're here in Austin.
If I ever come to Austin.
If you ever come to Austin.
This paperwork
you're definitely coming back.
I know, I wish
One
I could.
day.
But like, I feel like I'm in this like, what was that movie when just like someone woke up and it was the same day every day?
Groundhog Day?
Yeah. Because I just like, when you're just like stuck between all the paperwork and just you can't do anything, you're just like, oh my god, am I stuck here forever? But yeah.
How long have you been there?
Month.
Wow. I can't believe it's already been that much time.
Yeah, it's crazy. Now I'm already considering, like, I'll just go back to Ukraine. It's not that bad, but then you just, like, see
You're
the
that
pictures.
bored. Back to Ukraine. Oh, fuck.
Thank you so much. Yeah, everyone check out Lera, and if you have questions, just go spam her DMs and everything if you want to start doing mushroom stuff, and also check out her mushroom mycology class at the Odin. There's video lectures and also a kit that comes with it. And it's super, super interesting. And Lera live streams her classes and talks about, goes through everything and answers all the questions. So it's really nice. And she's a pretty good teacher. So definitely recommend. So, and she's not even paying me to say that.
Too. That's true.
Yeah, and she has a Patreon too.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm her only patron.
No, that's not true. I got another one like a week ago.
Oh my god.
So 2 patrons.
You could be third one, someone who's watching this.
Yeah.
I
owe you so many fungal cultures. Like, you've been a patron for probably 6 months now, so I owe you 6 cultures. And I've got some really fun ones in the mail, so...
So when I go back to Ukraine, I'll have to rebuild my lab. I'll have a mycology corner with new cultures.
Yeah.
That's nice. So yeah, go check out everything about mushrooms and Lera.
Thanks for having me, Daria.
Thanks for finally, being able to, like, you're spending your time on Sunday podcasting.
It's my pleasure, honestly.